to knock it warmed up. So second video starting now, guys. Not going to be a super long one. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But continue on with the Ford F-150 I was talking about. Ended up losing oil pressure, and we ended up doing a lot of stuff to that engine to try to make it work, and ended up pulling the motor back out. Really upset at that point because I was on a budget. It's like, dude, I don't have money to rebuild an engine. That's the whole reason we didn't rebuild the other motor that was in this truck. Which, if you guys know anything about Ford 302s or 5-liter Fords, the truck's a 95. It has a roller cam engine in it. That's what's supposed to be in that truck. And that's a factory engine that's in there. It was a crate motor from some auto parts store. I would guess O'Reilly's or AutoZone maybe. That was in there. It had a tag that said 2019 on it. So that's when the motor had been through the shop, or the rebuild shop. And I bought the truck in 2022. So February of 2023, I was driving it to work and it started getting hot on me. What is going on? So I pulled it in the shop and started looking at stuff. I went to pull the radiator cap off and it just geysered out of it. And I just drove it across the street. I mean, I'm like, not even a block. I'm like, what in the world is going on with this thing? So I ended up pulling the thermostat out. Well, somebody installed the thermostat in backwards. I said, oh my gosh. I'm like, what the amateurs were working on this thing? Of course, you saw the blue RTV, and I was just like, oh boy, this was a hack job. So, at least it is for me, being a mechanic. We don't do blue RGB. To me, that's a no-no. And maybe some people don't believe that, but I don't personally use it. Anyway, so got a different thermostat. We put it in the correct way. Drove it for another couple of weeks, and it was still getting warm. But I live 3 miles from work, so it doesn't get all that hot. Plus, it was cold, winter time for February. Finally, okay, this is annoying. I can't drive this anywhere. Like, I tried driving into Lincoln one time, and it was getting hot. Like, Lincoln, Nebraska, that is. I live about 30 minutes from Lincoln, and it started getting hot about halfway there. Granted, I had the snowblade and stuff on it, because it was wintertime. I was ready for snow. I had my snowblade mounted up. It uses a front receiver hitch. That's how that attaches to that. Anyway, I've showed a video on that already. Anyway, it was getting hot. I'm like, what in the world's going on with this thing? So I finally just said, you know what? Something's wrong with this motor. So we started doing that combustion leak test, and yeah, it's failing miserably. It's bubbling up the thing, turning it green. It's not supposed to turn green or yellow or whatever color. It's basically the color it wasn't supposed to turn. It was turning that color almost immediately. So combustion gases were getting into the coolant. So I figured head gasket or cracked head. I said, great, that sucks. I paid $4,000 for this truck, and now it's more or less dead in the water. I can't drive it more than to and from work. But I was like, yeah, I'm like, what if I need to go somewhere with it? This sucks, because I didn't have my Jeep. Actually, I didn't have my Jeeps anymore, because I had 2, and both of them crapped out within 4 months of each other. It was just so infuriating. I had a really bad run of luck when it came to that. Anyway, and continuing into that truck. Well, anyway, found an engine, 302 out of an 86 F-150, first year fuel injection, for those that are wondering. Non-roller engine, which I found out later. Which it didn't really matter. I was like, I don't care if it's 40 less horse or whatever. I just need an engine that runs. The guy said, yeah, it runs great, blah, blah, blah. We just pulled it out of the truck. We drove it from Gretna to Omaha, which I don't know how far that is. We'll say a 20-minute drive. And they said never missed a beat, blah, blah, and they ended up pulling it out. They ended up putting a 4BT Cummins in that truck, because that's what the kid wanted to do. I didn't care. It's like, whatever. Yep, I'll buy the motor for me at $400. He was trying to sell a transmission with it, which was an AOD, and I'm like, my truck doesn't have an AOD. Mine's got a 4R7W. I forget. I'm probably way off on that. It's the heavier duty one that's actually a surprisingly good transmission, which I had no idea when I bought the truck. I'm not an expert on transmissions. My older brother was like, yeah. He's like, really? That truck has that in there? A lot of your heavier trucks have that transmission. Your F-250s of that year would have that transmission if they were an automatic. It was a better transmission. The lighter duty ones was an AOD or an AODE. and AODE is electronically controlled AOD. The AOD still had a TV cable or throttle valve cable. AODE got rid of the throttle valve cable and went to an electronic solenoid or actuator. I forget exactly how they work, but that's how those work. Mine's the third option, which would be the second option because they only had two options in those trucks. Otherwise, you had a 5-speed manual, which I actually would have preferred, but I was on a time crunch and I needed a 4-wheel drive truck when my Jeep crapped out on me, or Jeeps crapped out on me. So ended up settling on this because between that truck there and there was a Dodge Dakota that looked like the bed was about ready to fall off. They were in my price range and they were both about $4,000, and the Dodge Dakota looked really rough. This truck is, well, you can kind of see it there. It's in pretty good shape. It's got some rust on it. It is far from perfect, and it's got a really bad paint job on it. I think Ray Charles painted it. I don't know what they were doing. It was an amateur paint job for sure. Very quick and dirty. We'll just put it that way. It was like a Earl Shimes paint over the paint, scuff it with the Scotch-Brite pad paint job, and no clear coat, so it looks like about like this paint on this mower. And that's, this wasn't done that long ago. The kid had it in high school, and I would say the guy was about 23, if I were to guess how old he was. Younger guy. I think he was getting married, so maybe that's why he was trying to sell the truck. It was this high school truck. It's got a bunch of stickers in the back window, which I never took off because he's got a headache rack or there's a headache rack on there, and in order to get the stickers off easy, I'd have to take the headache rack off. And I was like, you know what? People want to call me that guy's name. Ha ha ha. Real funny. But whatever, because he was like an assistant football coach or something. I don't know. But anyway, regardless of all that, ended up putting that motor, that 86 F150 motor in it. I've learned a few things about, and I'll go over it with you guys because I'm sure some of you guys might be interested in this, and I learned the hard way about differences, and I'm probably the only one that has done this because most people will put a roller cam engine in place of a non-roller cam engine. Reason being is because it's just a better engine. They just have a lot freer rolling parts. They don't have they're not as prone to wear out because they got roller lifters in them. This has a regular style hydraulic flat lifter like a Chevy 350 has. That's what these use. They're good motors. It's just they're not as good as the roller cam motors. There are better versions of them. Anyway, so found out that is not the same engine. That truck, the 86, it was still a serpentine, or sorry, it was still a V-belt system for the drive belts. My truck has serpentine belts, or serpentine belt, sorry, singular. And I was like, great. I'm like, that's all different. So I'm like, well, we're going to have to transfer all the pulleys over. I'm like, that's not that big a deal. Because I had all the brackets and everything. I could transfer it all over. Because the alternator was the big thing. I'm like, the alternator has to work on this truck. Because the one off of that 86 F-150 was completely different. I'm like, there's no way that's going to work. Unless I did some, like a one-wire GM alternator thing. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And that was the thing. I didn't have any money. I'm like, this has to be done. And the biggest thing is, I needed the truck back. I'm like, what if it snows again? I was like freaking out because I didn't have another 4-wheel drive vehicle. I live out in the country, in case you guys are wondering. I live 3 miles from town. There's a gravel road right over there, and behind me is all pasture and farm ground. I'm not by the highway is about a half mile that way, and that goes to Ceresco, and then this goes, well, it's sort of Valparaiso. It goes to the other highway and then connects to Valparaiso. So Valparaiso is that direction from me, which I know doesn't make any sense when you're looking at a camera, but anyway, I know the directions. I can't tell you north, south, east, or west. I'll get lost in a parking lot if you tell me go north. I'm what? Where's north? And yeah, I'm not. Like I said, I'd be like, yeah, okay there, Lewis and Clark or Magellan. I'm not one of those people. You say go over to there next to that sign, I can see it, I'll go that way. Or head towards a town, I know where that town is, okay, I head that way. Or go towards this highway, I know that's how I do directions. Some people, everybody's different, but anyway, getting off subject. So we got that motor installed finally, and we started figuring out all the differences between the motors. First hurdle we ran into, and there were some others that I'll get to in a second. Uh, we got the engine in the truck, and well, actually, this is what happened first. We got the engine in the truck. I started dumping coolant in the engine, and it just started puking out the front timing cover. And I'm like, what is going on? Because anyway, we found out, and I didn't know this, in 86, and then I don't know when they changed it. 86 to 95, they changed the water pump design. And why, I don't know. They don't interchange. They're different water pumps, which is super annoying because, well, one's a roller cam engine, one's not. So there must be some differences in the way the engine's designed. I found out the water pumps aren't the same. So I was using the gaskets and stuff for a 95 on an 86 block. Well, and the water pump as well. Well, the ports on the water pump are different. They are orientated a different way. They look kind of like a U shape. Well, on one engine they're like this, and the other engine they're like this. Well, half of the port was just going out into the timing, going out into the open air, which was extremely frustrating. And and the thing is, you got it installed, and the bolts were all the same. They went in there no problem. And so you didn't know. You're sticking it on there, and you're leaning over like this. It's not like you can look at the back side of it when you're putting it on. We didn't have the engine on the engine stand. We were doing this in the truck. So we didn't think anything of it. And, stick the water pump on there. We were just swapping over accessories and stuff. And because we had the other engine on the engine stand, the one that we pulled out of the truck, and we were taking all the accessories off of that truck to put on this other engine that we stuck into the truck because I was going to put serpentine belt system on it, which is what I have on there now. Anyway, we were just scratching our heads going, what in the world? Why is it leaking? And we took it off twice, kept put more gasket sealer on it, which, ended up doing the RTV trick, which was just, it just makes me cringe. I hate doing that. And stuck it back on there. Tried again, just dumped straight water in it this time. That's pissing out on the ground. I'm like, what is going on? It's getting late, and I'm tired. I'm like, this is frustrating. So we ended up pulling it off. We started looking at the other water pump, looking at the other water pump. Noticed the ports are different. And as I had mentioned, 86 and somewhere in the middle there, 95 are different water pumps. So I'm like, crap, what are we going to do now? I'm like, this isn't going to work. There's no way this is going to work. Well, we started doing some research and stuff, and apparently Mustang's motors with the 5 liters they had in the Mustangs, they apparently made a different version with a round hole port in the middle. And they have a mid plate on the Ford water pumps that actually go in between there, and that's like I guess you would call it an adapter. It's kind of like a lazy man universal water pump deal. So we started thinking, I was like, because I wasn't going to pay, it was an expensive one. They're like $190 for a water pump. I'm not spending that much on a water pump. Plus, there was nothing wrong with the one I had. It was brand new. So I was like, we started thinking, and this is when the redneck butchery came in. I was like, hey, Chris, my older brother, who I had, my truck was at his shop because he's got concrete and a shop to work in. I got nothing. I'm working out here at freaking crushed rock, which is just infuriating. I just absolutely hate working on cars out here. Mowers I can put up with, but that stuff is just beyond just frustrating to work on. I do have some concrete where the car's parked. There's this concrete pad. That's the only concrete on this whole property that I can park a vehicle on. Yeah, it's beyond frustrating to work on stuff out here. My little carport over there, it's got a light in there, but it don't do any good when it's a dirt floor. So anyway, when trying to run a jack and a cherry picker and all that stuff, that don't work. You gotta have concrete or something solid to roll a cherry picker on. And most of my yard and parking area is crushed rock and overgrown with grass. So yeah, not ideal for that. Anyway, sorry. Ended up brainstorming a little bit, and we came up with an idea. What if we blocked part of the hole off with a piece of metal and welded in? This was my idea partially, and then his idea was, well, yeah. He's like, do you have any sheet metal laying around anyway? Because then he does a lot of he has a couple of pulling trucks, so he does some fabrication and stuff for his own stuff, and plus he farms, so he does a lot of repairs and stuff of that nature. Plus he has a pretty good welder and decent setup there at the shop, because his father-in-law actually has a really nice shop not too far from where we were. It's a big farmyard. There's the shop he works in, and then his father-in-law works in the other shop, because it's actually their farm ground that he just helps out with. Anyway, so start brainstorming with him. He said, "Yeah, we could do that." And then, ironically, his wife's pulling truck, they had taken the hood and cut holes in it to they put upright stacks on pulling trucks. That's a 460 Ford motor with upright stacks to go through the hood. Well, he cut sections of the hood out. Well, we actually used he kept the sections that he cut out on that truck, and I was like, I just happened to see him laying there on the shelf in his pile of junk. I said, "What's this from?" He said, "Oh, those are off of my wife's pulling truck's hood." And I was like, "Can I use these?" And he said, "Yeah, go for it. They were just going to sit there forever anyway." And so we ended up cutting them out, grinder and curved them, and then we stuck them in there and tack welded them in and welded them solid and ground them smooth and slathered them with RTV and stuck her together and stuck the water pump on there and crossed our fingers. And yes, the thing does not leak. The fricker, new word. The frickin' thing doesn't leak. I was just, yes! But then we couldn't get the thing to start. We're cranking. I'm like, what is going on? We checked spark. Yeah, we got spark. Checked fuel. Yeah, it's got fuel. And then we checked ignition, or checked injector pulse. Yes, it's got injector pulse, but it was doing something strange. And we had already known, this is the other thing, I had mentioned this before we started cranking. I said, hey, older 302s had a different firing order from the later 302s. The later 302s went to 351 firing order, which I just remembered that from something. I don't remember. Oh, my dad had done this on his truck. He has a 79 F150 with a 88 F150 motor in it. Not fuel injected. He went back to carbureted. But because those engines interchange because they're both non-roller engines. So we ended up got the water pump situation figured out. Anyway, we wired the firing order correct to my truck with 95 firing order, because that's how the computer's set up. And so I was just like, okay, well, bullet dodge. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, are the injectors firing at the right time? And then my brother, he was actually master certified Ford tech for several years, and he doesn't do mechanic work anymore. He's actually a farmer now, which kind of sad. He was actually pretty good at what he did, but he just got burned out, I guess, and decided it wasn't for him anymore. Which I get it, because there are days when I would love to walk out that door, and somehow I'm sticking it out. I am not nearly as smart as he is when it comes to some of the diagnosis stuff, and it just makes me mad. I'm like, the people that quit are the ones that need to stay in it, and people like me need to get out of it, but we end up getting stuck in it because everybody else is quitting. And well, my case is, I don't know what else they do. I've been doing automotive since 2009 I graduated. I've been doing automotive mechanic work since then, and it's just like, I don't know what else I do. It's like my skill set's just so different or unique. I'd have to go back to school again, and I'm 34, going to be 35 this year. It's just one of those things. Like, what do I want to go back to school for? I don't know. And I just never really. I thought about maybe going back for like motorcycle or like small engine or something like that. I was like, oh, that'd be interesting, but it's just literally the same thing I'm doing now, just with a different vehicle. And to me, that's just like, I don't know. It's you're not really gaining a whole lot, in my opinion. It's like I wanted to do something like unrelated or different to kind of change my mindset. I don't know, relieve some stress, because I get pretty stressed out working on cars anymore. If I'm away from it for a while, I actually enjoy it. But if I'm around it all the time, it's just like, that's the last thing I want to do. If I have somebody or me telling me he wants to do a motor swap in his car, wants me to come over after work someday, I just go, yeah, I'm busy. It's just like, I sound like an ass, but I'm not trying to be. I'm just so done with working on cars when I get off work sometimes. That's why it was such a struggle working on this truck, because I need the damn truck to work. I don't have time to be messing with it. I'm like, I have enough on my plate the way it is. I'm so stressed out from work, just all that stuff. It was just all piling up. Anyway, so finally, I talked to my brother a little bit about it, and he said, go get some wiring schematics from work and look up 1986 F150 injector wiring diagram. Then look up 95 F150 wiring diagram for injectors. So I got them both. He looked at them and he goes, yep. He's like, I thought so. He said, okay, 1986 had a thing that was called batch fire. And from my understanding, and I might be wrong, each bank of cylinders fired at the same time. So bank 1 would fire, bank 2 would fire, bank 1 would fire, bank 2 would fire. This was kind of an early version of fuel injection. It still had 8 injectors, but it would fire them. It would fire them all at the same time, and it would just when the valve would open, it would just let fuel in, basically like a carburetor. It was just a electronic carburetor, if you want to think of it like that, with the individual nozzles for each intake runner. Anyway, that's how they used to do it, and the wiring schematic is completely different for those. So 95, of course, is what they call sequential fuel injection, and that fires in a sequence like a firing order, like your spark plugs do, which is definitely a better design. That's how everything is today. Anyway, figured that out. Well, the biggest hurdle was now, well, shoot, how do we wire this? I'm not going to go cutting up a wiring harness and splicing wires and all that stuff. And then he starts looking and goes, no, we don't have to do that. They all share a common ground. All we got to do is change over the pins for the power side. So he unplugged the big, chunky plug-in that's on the driver's side fender well. That's your main engine harness. And he figured out which pins were which I was like, that's where he really shines, because I struggle so bad at that. We repinned it to make it right. And sure enough, guess what? The sucker started up and she ran. And, followed by immediate disappointment after it warmed up and started knocking. That was just beyond infuriating, because it started up, it was running good, and all of a sudden, knock. This is the fuel pressure gauge. It was just flipping out in the truck. I'm like, what is going on with that fuel pressure gauge? It was going like 040, 040, 040, 040, and it just kept doing that. I'm like, it's never did that before. Like with the old motor, it was never super great. It was always like 20, which is R on normal. It has a normal, it says normal. Ford doesn't use numbers because they're weird. It was R, and now it was bouncing off R and N, and it was just freaking out. I'm like, what is going on with this thing? Like, something ain't right. So, and we went, it sounds like a rod knock. So, what do we do? I guess, well, I hate to say this, but I think we got to pull the motor. Pull the motor out again. Keep in mind, this will be the second time this motor's come out of this truck. First motor we had out, and then pulling this motor out again. We put 2 motors in, or so we put 1 motor in so far, pulled 2 motors out. Frustrating. Back on the engine stand, start digging into this motor. It is full of carbon, grime, grit. It was just, what happened to this engine? So we were dumping parts cleaner, diesel fuel, just everything we could to clean all this crud out of this engine. And I bought like 5 or 6 cans of brake clean, and I was just hosing this crap down. Pull the valve covers off, and you could pick up chunks of carbon out of the valve train. I'm like, how did this thing even run? I was like, oh my gosh. So that was definitely not a good deal. Well, in the process, I found a bent push rod. It wasn't severely bent, but enough that it's like, okay, that's not good. And that's probably because a piece of carbon got stuck underneath one of the valves or something, and it bent one of the push rods. So I was like, great. So lifters, probably a good idea. So ended up buying lifters for it. Got a couple new push rods because we didn't trust the one that got bent. I tried straightening it, but I was like, just put a new one in there. They're not that expensive, which they weren't. They were like $20 for like 4 of them, I think. Get some noises. It's windy out here, and it's like wanting to try to rain, but it hasn't yet. Anyway, could be wild animals. Does make me a bit nervous. There are deer and coyotes and stuff out around this area, so gotta watch it. I get a little spooked when I'm out in my yard and all of a sudden a deer goes running by. It's not a John Deere, an actual deer. Anyway, so pulled the engine apart, or not, we didn't pull the heads off. We had the valve covers off, so we said, okay, well, that looks okay. Let's flip the motor over and see the real culprit. Of course, we drained oil and stuff at this point. Pull the oil pan off. Checking stuff. I'm like, stuff's tight. That's weird. None of the rods were loose. Okay, maybe something's just bound and it just doesn't do it right now. So we pulled all the rod caps off. There's some scratches and stuff, which it had 160,000 miles, the engine did. So it wasn't a low mileage engine. I wasn't, for what I paid for it, I wasn't expecting the moon. I just wanted something that ran. And keep in mind, the truck has 222,000 miles on it, which is, I think, 224 now. And I said it fits the truck. So anyway, trying to remember what I exactly did. Like I said, it's been February already since I did this, and I work on cars for a living, so stuff kind of gets muddled together after a while. Granted, I don't do a lot of engine work, but I do a lot of other stuff. So plus messing around with all these mowers and stuff lately has just been driving me nuts, so it's just hard to focus on things that happened several months ago. Anyway, so go back to that. We ended up pulling all the rod caps off. Saw some minor scratches. You could see that the bearings had some pretty decent wear on them, and like I said, that's probably all from the carbon and crap that was in the engine. So must be leaves falling off the tree or something. I was like, what is all that noise over there? It sounds like just make me jittery. Anyway, watch too many horror movies, I guess.